Hello again and welcome back to another one of our tutorials. Now, one of the most popular designs that we've done during the Back to Basics series of videos is the horizontal design or the long and low arrangement, often referred to as a table centre design. It's got lots of different names and I'm sure in different parts of the world you refer to it with a slightly different name. But for me here in the UK, we tend to call it a long and low arrangement. Quite often sits in the centre of a table, or it might sit at the front of the table for something like a wedding reception where it's arranged so that you have lots of foliage flowing over the front of the table and cascading down in front of the bride and groom. Now, it's one of our most watched tutorials and I thought I'd look at it again today, but with a bit of a Christmassy feel. We're heading now into that festive season. So I've picked some gorgeous festive flowers and foliages, things that are hopefully easily available. Please remember that this channel and these videos are aimed at beginners in flower arranging. They are simple designs and easy arrangements that you can copy at home by purchasing some flowers at your local florist or from a greengrocer, or of course your supermarket. Now, don't forget, if you're enjoying the tutorials, please subscribe to the channel, hit the bell if you want to be notified every time I upload a new tutorial, and soon we're going to be launching some ebooks or some leaflets, some booklet type information that you can purchase separately to coincide with the videos that we're creating. Okay, so what have we got today? Now, I'm going to be using the plastic tray. This is flat and gives lots of stability on a table. The design is low, so we don't need to have a raised container or anything too high. Remember that it's going to be in the middle of the table and you need to have clear vision between you and the person sitting opposite you on the table. And what I've done with the floral foam this time, you might be able to tell, I've used just half a block. So this is the full size block. And what I've done is I've just cut it lengthways down the middle, and I'm going to use half a size. And the reason for that is because most tables, you know, the table that you sit in to have your evening meal is quite narrow. So by using a smaller piece of foam, I can make a narrower design. It will allow plenty of room to have your plates, your crockery, cutlery, lovely glassware. Maybe if it's for Christmas time, you will be having crackers or gifts on the table as well. So we're going to allow ourselves less foam so the design doesn't become too wide. So that's the reasoning behind using a smaller piece. If I was making this maybe for a top table of a wedding, I would probably use the full block because I would need to make that more substantial and more attractive, and probably use a larger quantity of flowers. So whether or not you've got the full block or you're going to do the same as me and cut it in half, both methods are perfectly acceptable. So I've chosen some Christmassy foliages. This one is Nordman pine, and you might be familiar with this because we quite often have a Christmas tree that's the Nordman variety. This is a really long lasting foliage. It's got that silvery tone on the back and dark green on the front, and this will last you well into the new year. So it's a great one to use in your Christmas wreaths or in any outdoor decorations. If you're struggling to get hold of it, you can sometimes pick this up from your Christmas tree supplier, and they sell all the loose bits that they cut off the bottom. If you can't get this, you might get blue pine from a florist shop, or you could use something flat like conifer or leatherleaf or some of the florist ruscus. But you know, whatever you can get, have a go with that. This one is a foliage from my garden, and this is called quince. It has that little fruit on it during the summer, sort of late autumn months. And I've chosen this one because it gives me a bit of texture. So the pine obviously is very much like small needles. This one is a much flatter leaf and give me some texture in a variety of shapes within the arrangement. Now I have also got just a small bit. Oh, we're all a bit tangled up here. This is viburnum. I thought I'd cut more than this, but again, this is a shrub from the garden and it's got a beautiful red stem on it. So I thought that would pick up really nicely on the colour of my flowers. And I've got a selection of red roses. This variety is called First Love. And then I've got some red spray carnations, and I've gone with a more burgundy tone. We call this clove, and it's a richer, more burgundy colour red, and I think this always works really well at Christmas, and it matches beautifully with my rose. So 2 lovely flowers. I've got more of those to go, but I just brought a selection out to show you. I'm going to use silver toned accessories in this arrangement, so I've also picked some of the eryngium. So this is the sea holly or the thistle, and it's a bluey silver tone, so that's going to work really well with my foliages, and it's also going to pick up the colour of the silver twigs that I've got. Now this is Vaccinium, or more commonly known as the blueberry, and this is the shrub that those succulent blueberries that we eat grows from, and some clever person has thought when we cut this back every year we could spray it silver and sell it to the florist industry. But any twigs again would do. You can quite often pick up glittered or decorative twigs in the supermarket. To pick up on that silver theme, I've got some of these lovely birch stars. I nearly called them birch twigs then, but they're birch stars. So this is the birch bark off a tree, and it's been flattened and cut out into these heart shapes. I haven't done those personally, I've bought those in ready done, and I've mounted those onto a wire. Now I'll show you how to do that a little bit later in the video. I've also got some natural cones, just your ordinary pine cone from the garden. You can pick these up if you're foraging. You can also collect them from, or buy them rather, from a florist shop. And I'm also going to introduce some red candles. Now I think ideally I should have gone for a darker red candle, because this is quite a bright red compared to the burgundy tone of my spray carnation. But when I ordered them online, they did look a slightly darker tone. So possibly a bit bright alongside my flowers, but you know, never mind. Even I make mistakes from time to time. And one thing that I've forgotten, and it's currently still in the bucket, are these gorgeous red ilex berries. So we've used these before in one of the other Christmas videos in an apricot shade. This is the leafless holly Ilex verticulata, and it's going to work really well in the arrangement that I've got today. So I think that's everything done. Don't forget, we need a good strong pair of scissors and floral tape to hold our oasis into the tray. I'm going to change the camera angle so that you're looking down on the design and you'll see it far more clearly, and I think we're ready to go. So now we've turned the camera angle downwards, you're going to have a much better view of the floral foam and the shape of the arrangement as I create it. And like all other types of arrangements, what we need to do first is attach our floral foam to our plastic tray, and I'm going to be using the green floral tape to make sure my floral foam doesn't move in the container. So please always remember to attach your plastic tape to the container first, not to the floral foam, because it won't adhere to the floral foam, and take it round the container at least twice. So you'll see I've attached it to the floral tray, the plastic tray. I've taken it over the top of the foam and I've gone round, and I always finish it back on the top. The reason for that is if it's a table arrangement and it's moving back and forth on the table, or it might be in the back of your delivery vehicle and it's sliding back and forth, eventually the tape that's on the underneath will work its way loose. So I've always been trained to finish it at the top there, finish it on top of the tape so that it has a clean dry surface area to stick to. So 2 layers on either side. Then what I'm going to do next is use my candles. So I've got 2 lovely red taper candles, and I've also got these plastic holders, these candle holders that you can buy online or from a good florist shop. And this size of candle fits comfortably into the base of that plastic holder, and I'm going to insert that into the center of my foam. Now I have 2 candles, so we'll do the same push it in nice and firmly, and we're going to attach them side by side as close to the center of that foam as I can get. And then straight away I've got the center of my floral foam identified, and that will eventually become my focal point. Now try and get them so they stand up straight, so when you're looking at them from different directions, they're standing up like two soldiers. And that is the basic starting point to our floral design. Now I've got myself a little bit of chalk because I'm going to help sort of define what a double-ended spray or a table arrangement looks like. Now generally we decide on the length of the arrangement, so the length would be from the center point here, so if I just draw a line here from the center point to the end, and that's pretty much in camera view, so I'm just going to do it approximately that length. That's going to be our length, and then you have to imagine that on the opposite side. And when you're learning, you could do that with a ruler. As you become more confident, you can pretty much gauge it by eye. I'm going to go roughly to about there, and that keeps in camera shot at the moment for me to give you an example. And that is the length of your arrangement on both sides, and each side is symmetrical, so it balances visually from this side to this side. And then we estimate what the width is, and if it was a traditional table arrangement or a funeral spray which has the same basic rules, our widths are going to be half of this distance here. So if we can imagine what half of that distance would be, and I'm guessing it will probably be about that width, that there is how wide our design becomes. So I'm going to have to move it back slightly because I can't fit that in on the table. So this is our length, and your length is gauged by the length of the table that you're putting the design on, if you're following traditional rules. So the length would be a third of your overall table length. Now obviously at home you're going to have a smaller table, but you might want to size up the arrangement just because it's Christmas and you want to put on a nice show, and you might have lots of flowers and lots of foliage. But if it was for a wedding table centre, it's generally a third of the size of your table. So if we go back to estimating what half of the length from the middle would be, I'm guessing it's about there. So that is about a hand span for me, and then that's going to come out to roughly that point there. And if I do it on the opposite side, that is giving me my outline shape. And at the moment, if we move this out of the way, I'll just put a cross there in the center. That's our center, and this is our length, and this is our width of the arrangement. Now if you think of a table at home, your normal dining room table, you're probably going to find that that width is too long. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to halve that to roughly here. Let's get rid of these two lines on the outside. So that's roughly half of the length. So we've got the width there is half of this length here. And if we join these lines together, this is a very, very basic tip if you're learning. Oops, my chalk's broken in half. So if we join those together, you'll see that you have a diamond shape. And that is the basic outline of a long and low table arrangement. Table center, this is your center, and this is roughly how we estimate our size. Now if I was doing a funeral spray, I would go to that longer line, to the original measurement. So the funeral spray would be much wider. But for your house, those inside measurements are quite adequate, and they don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be measured perfectly, but when you're beginning, often this is a good way of explaining to people how to create a design. And I often, when I've got beginners here at the studio, I quite often get them to do this, to mark it out with chalk on the table, and it helps them understand how the proportions work. And then several times when I'm explaining a flower arrangement, you'll hear me talk about radiating stems, stems that all aim for a center point. And what that means is all of your stems radiate out from a centre point, and they all come out in this sort of direction, and I sometimes refer to that as spokes of a wheel or the rays of a sun. So all our stems look like they're radiating out from a centre point. And if I use a rose as an example, so they all look like they're radiating from that centre point. And the stems all look like they're going into the middle. We don't aim our stems at different sections within the foam. It all gets aimed towards an imaginary point in the centre. Now, depending on whether or not your foliage is rounded shapes or whether it's pointy shaped, will define this outline. And if I just get a piece of the Nordman pine, now the Nordman pine is going to create my outline, and that's quite pointy and quite angular. So my design is going to end up looking more like a pointed diamond shape. But if your foliage is rounder, so you could be using hebe from the garden, salal, some types of ruscus, then you might end up with your design looking more oval and more rounded. And that's perfectly acceptable. Let me just do that one again. That's perfectly acceptable. But instead of having this very severe diamond shape, you're going to end up with more of a curved outline, so your design becomes more oval. As a florist, I think our foliages tend to be a lot more angular and a lot more pointy, so we do quite often end up with a more diamond shape. If you're using garden foliages and softer flowers and softer foliage, then you do get this much more rounded effect. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an explanation on how to create your outline shape. I'm hoping that helps explain shapes of a double-ended spray, in which case that would be used for a funeral, table centre or horizontal design. Now for the exciting bit, we'll get to put some flowers in. Okay, so this time I'm going to start with the outline first. Sometimes in flower arranging and floristry, to give you the basic shapes, I start with the flowers first. But for this type of design, I'm going to work with my foliage to give me a good clear outline shape. And I'm going to start with the Nordman pine. So this is this lovely textured pine. And I'm going to look for some longish pieces. And I'm going to try and find two pieces that are fairly similar in their shape. If I just pull this back a second, if I look for two that are fairly similar in shape, they don't have to be identical. If you cut them to the same length, then you know that your design is going to be equal on both sides and there's no guesswork involved. What we need to do is make sure that we remove any of the little pines or any thorns, any larger leaves off the base, so we have a clear section to go into our floral foam. And because it's a really woody foliage, I'm going to cut that at a slight angle, opens up more surface area and gives you a pointed stem to insert into the foam. And I'm going to do the same with this one, a little bit of an angle, nice clean stem, and these are going to go into my foam, flat down onto the table, so that there's a seamless join, there's no gap in between. A lot of people when they're learning tend to go in this position and put it up in the air, but it really needs to be flat down on the table like so. Okay, so if you remember, the width of the design is a maximum of half of the length on this side. Let's just get rid of those pine needles. But we discussed in the beginning that I needed to make it a little bit narrower. So what I'm going to do is just use some small pieces of the pine. So this is the Nordman pine. So I'm just going to use some small pieces to gauge my width of the arrangement, and narrow so that it's going to fit quite comfortably onto my table. Then if we come back to the chalk and we put this sort of imaginary line in, that's the area that I need to fill in. If we go on the opposite side, that's not 100% accurate, but it gives you a rough idea. So we now need to have just small pieces of the Nordman pine to create the outline. So if I place it in this position here, you can see it's over the line, so it's a little bit too long, and we'll go a little bit smaller. Now, those of you who are more competent flower arrangers, you might be watching this video and thinking that I'm making a very formal design and that flower arranging isn't really about following structured rules like this. But when you're a beginner, I think it's easier to have a shape to follow, because it's hard sometimes to understand the shape that you're trying to create. I'm just going to make this one a little bit longer and make this one my second placement. So I now have almost a diamond shape forming with the material, and I'm going to do the same towards the back. Just get ourselves a little bit of a longer piece here, and I can fill in this back area. So arranging at the moment, if you follow anybody on Instagram or any social media posts, flower arranging at the moment tends to be quite informal, with lots of movement and lots of rhythm and repetition in it. But for me, until you learn the basic skills, it's hard to progress on to these more informal and more trendy designs that are really quite popular at the moment. So you might be looking and thinking, gosh, this is very structured and this is very formal, but this is how you learn. And I can't stress that my YouTube channel is aimed at beginners, and I think if you don't learn the basic rules, it's very hard to move on and be more creative with your arranging. Right, okay, so that's my bottom layer of foliage. And you can see it's really close to the table, it's flat against the table, and I'm almost following that diamond shape outline with my candles there in the centre. Now I'm going to introduce another textured foliage, and I'm going to start working with the quince and a little bit of this viburnum as well. And I'm also going to bring in some of the pine through to the top part of the arrangement as well. Otherwise I'll end up with this almost like a skirt or a collar around the outside. If you don't have a selection of foliages like I have here, then it's perfectly acceptable to use all of the same type of foliage. But I'm lucky enough with this arrangement to have a choice. So I'm starting with the quince, and this is a completely different texture, it's a different shaped leaf, so it really gives me some interesting contrasts in amongst my foliage. But I'm still quite low down on the base. I'm creating a strong outline and introducing different textures and different flowers. And then when I feel that I can't get any more into the side of my foam, I'm going to start working towards the top, remembering that everything should be radiating out from the center point. So if I show you with a piece of the pine, so we're coming at this angle, so everything looks like it's heading towards the base of these candles. We're not coming straight upright in the foam like this, because that's arranging in a parallel style. We are arranging in a radial fashion. So we need to bring everything out from the center, radiating out from a center point. So again, I'm going to use a bit of the pine, so we've got a variation in textures. So what you need to be careful of is that you keep your foliage low down, so that when the candles are lit, we don't allow them to get too close to the foliage, which will then become a fire risk. Okay, so I've gone slightly longer with these pieces so that they are stepping down from the foliage on the end, coming into shorter pieces of foliage in the middle. Now you could of course use holly, which has a lovely Christmassy feel, but it's quite prickly to work with on your hands. It's not the most pleasant of materials to use. But conifer works fantastically well. Juniper, if you've got any of that in your garden. And now I've created an outline, the area that I'm working on. Now this design is an all-round design, so it's going to be seen from all directions, from the left and the right and the front and the back, and it's really quite beneficial for you to keep turning it round when you're learning how to make flowers, flower designs. Otherwise the design ends up one-sided. You end up with more material on one side. So I've turned mine around now, and I'm going to add in this lovely viburnum, which has that wonderful red stem on it. So I've cut the viburnum at different lengths, short pieces for the middle and slightly longer pieces for the outside edge. And I'm trying to incorporate it in all parts of the design. So it's to the left, to the right, to the front and to the back, so that we've got a variation of this texture and this colour all the way throughout the arrangement. And for a minute, I think that is all I'm going to put in. Now you could of course make this just foliage and add some accessories in the end. Lovely lush green Christmas foliages work really well at this time of the year. But for me, I'm going to stop there. You can still see some of the floral foam, so there's enough room for me to put my flowers in and enough room for my accessories. And then if I need to at the end, I can fill in any gaps after my flowers have gone in. Okay, so we'll start with the red roses first, and this is going to give us our focal line and our focal flowers. And just like when we've made arrangements in the past, the smaller of the flowers come to the outside edge. So I've chosen the smaller rose head, and that's going to create my outline. And your flowers are always shorter than your foliage. The foliage is there to protect your flowers and to create the outline. Again, I'm using my rose to measure how long the opposite rose needs to be. And I'm working quite low down on the floral foam on the shortest section, and we're aiming to have these two are a similar length. Then I'm going to stagger that line, so very much like we do the focal line when we do an upright arrangement. I'm going to stagger the line from one side to the other, bringing it through the middle. Now don't forget, if you've got roses and they're a little bit damaged, you can always remove the sepals and the guard petals that are on the outside. I like the guard petals being left on because I think it gives the flower a bit of character. Obviously if they're damaged, then you need to remove them because they'll be quite unsightly. So that there straight away is my staggered focal line, which brings my eye from the left to the right. And now I'm going to almost repeat that through the width of the arrangement, but this time with much shorter flowers. So I'm going to bring one on that side and one on the opposite side, so they are similar in length, and then one to bring my eye more towards the focal flower, and one on my side again a little bit lower down. This creates recession. It makes your eye move down towards the base and it gives the design depth, and it also helps to cover the floral foam. And straight away we've got quite a simple outline shape there. This one I think is a little bit high. And if you imagine again a line coming from the end up to the top, everything stays now within the line that we've created with those roses when you look at it from the side. Just going to get rid of those because they're a little bit unsightly. And that's your basic outline shape. Now if you only had roses to work with, you could add another section in these gaps here. If you think of this as a clock, and if I hold it that way, this is almost 12 o'clock. Then we've almost got this at 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock. And then the gaps in between you can easily fill out with more roses, or in my case it's going to be the spray carnations and the other flowers that I've got to use. Okay, so now it's time for these lovely clove spray carnations, this more burgundy red. And what I love about the spray carnations is they have a wonderful shape to them, and they're really a quite versatile and economical flower. Now I'm going to slightly thin the stem out because we don't need to have so many flowers per stem. And then what I'm going to do is add them to the length. So add them to the rows so that I've now got a different colour and a different flower working its way right out to the edge. And if you have a choice, these would be the smaller of the budded flowers, so the buds as opposed to the large open flowers which come more towards the centre. And that's part of making the design visually balanced. So what I'm going to do is bring the more open flowers towards the middle and then continue strengthening the outline. Now you've created a really good outline shape with your foliage, so we don't want to lose that now. We've spent time working hard on getting the shape correct at the beginning. So by adding our flowers in now, shorter than the foliage, it reinforces the outline and brings the red colour in all the way to the outer edge. So I'm trying now to use the smaller flowers, the smaller buds, and then the ones that are showing more colour I'm going to bring more towards the centre. I'm going to add something to the rose because we don't want it to be lonely all on its own. And again, the more open ones are going to come towards the centre because that is our focal point and our focal area. So we're bringing some visual weight towards the centre. And I'm just going to spin it round because at the moment I'm working on it from one side. And spin it all the way round. I'm going to get myself another spray carnation. Keep working until I'm happy that all areas have the red colouring in it and the texture and the shape of the spray carnation. Okay, now what I quite often suggest for beginners to do at this stage is to put it down on the ground and have a look at it from further away, because you can really appreciate the shape when the design is further away from you, and you can look more clearly to see whether the design needs more colour on this side or less colour on this side here, and it works really well looking at it. I'm just going to make this a bit shorter. I feel it's sticking up a bit too high in the air. Right, now I'm going to put two final spray carnations just in this area and this area here. Just get a longer stem. And at the moment I think we've got a really good distribution of the flowers, and the same shape and the same colour combination is on the left and the right and the front and the back, so it is evenly distributing the flowers from one side to the other. Now traditionally I think that red and gold works really well, but I've noticed in interior decorating at the moment we're seeing lots of silver and red together, so I thought we'd introduce some silver tones into the arrangement. And I'm going to use this lovely little laryngium. It's got a completely different shape and texture, and again I'm working it round so that we have some in the centre and we have some to the outer edge, and if you think of the whole head of the little thistle, it's quite a dominating flower, so by breaking it down into smaller pieces it allows us to have longer sections to place towards the end and towards the outline. There we are, so we've got the silver running right the way through to the end. Now the eryngium, this lovely blue thistle, or this almost a whitey green I've got in here today, they will dry really well, and you can keep them for flower arranging at a later date. You could spray paint them, and you could keep using them over and over again. So if you're practicing, the eryngium is a really good one to have. Now what I'm doing with the branches, so this has been dyed this lovely shiny silver. I'm again introducing it to the edge, and I'm keeping within my foliage outline. I don't need to make the design any longer or any wider. I'm using short, small but little bits and slightly longer bits towards the end. But again, I'm trying to ensure that we have the silver on the ends, we have the silver in the middle and on the shorter widths of the arrangement as well. Now if you're only using foliage and you're creating this design with foliage from the garden, then just do exactly the same thing. Whereas I've placed the flowers in, you would keep doing the same method but with using your different types of foliage. So now if I tilt that forward, hopefully you get to see how that silver is distributed from one side to the other, through the centre and on both sides. And I'm hoping that I haven't lost the outline shape that we spent time creating in the very beginning. So my next material to use is the Ilex verticulata, and this is the hollyberry. This is the leafless holly. You can probably get this in a good florist shop, and I'm going to use this long pieces towards the outer edge and then the shorter pieces towards the middle. So like I did with the spray carnation, I'm going to cut this. I'm going to cut the side shoots off because the side shoots make your eye travel out in different directions, and we need our eye to travel along the length of the arrangement. So it's just a case of thinning out your piece of berry so that you've got a more linear shape to it. So this would be then referred to as a line material, and that helps to reinforce the outline shape. And I'm going to do the same with this piece. Now this piece doesn't have so many side sections that are long, so this is more linear in its pattern and its shape. But I'm still going to remove some of the berries from the outside. It just makes a more elegant shape, and we'll bring that right to the outside edge. At the moment, the red texture is only on the outside. That berried shape and the berry texture is only on the outside. So we need to bring it all the way through the middle. And this is where all these short pieces come in handy that I've cut from the main length, from the main branches of the berry. Nice clean cut on the bottom again. It's a very woody material, so need to increase its chances of taking up water. So good clean cut on the bottom, and I'm going to work it through on both sides. So the side that you're seeing, that I'm often referring to as the front, and I'm referring to it, it's not correct to refer to it as the front because this arrangement is all round and going to be seen from all directions. But by adding the berry, the shorter pieces of berry, we now have a link between the colour that's on the very outer edge, and we've brought it all the way through the middle. Now it doesn't matter if some of the pieces are a bit shorter, they will give us depth and it will draw your eye down into the centre and give us a lovely three-dimensional effect. I've got one piece here which is quite tall, and I'm going to add him in the middle, and I'm just now using up the small pieces that I've already cut off. And just get rid of that one. Now if I turn it round again, so you can see the area, the side that I've been working on, then hopefully it's very similar. If we look at it from the side, it's nice and slimline, so there are plenty of space on either side for cutlery, plates and glasses and all those accessories that you have on the table. And it's a really nice slimline design that's slightly wider here in the centre. I think that's coming along really nicely. Now I have some accessories. We of course have some cones and some stars, and we'll add those in to bring us help with the overall harmony. So the overall harmony is Christmas. We're looking for a Christmas theme, a Christmas style. This will introduce a different texture and a different colour into the arrangement, and give me something that's really Christmassy and going to bring in that festive feel. Okay, I'm just going to move this to one side for a minute so I can show you how to wire up a cone. Just get rid of these. Now you'll see that I've already done these cones, and we have 2 wires poking out of the bottom of those cones. That's called a double leg mount. And if you've watched the Halloween video where we use pampas grass, we use the same technique there to secure the pampas grass together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the middle section of my wire through the cone, through the teeth of the cone, and I'm going to take it all the way around to the opposite side so that the 2 wires meet. And it doesn't matter if this is your first attempt at doing this, if your wires don't perfectly match. It'll come with practice. And then we're going to twist them round so that we have the 2 prongs, the 2 wired prongs, to go into our floral foam, and it will give us a nice stable attachment. So we need to do the same then to our stars. So I've got 4 stars, I've clearly lost one. Here it is. And these came with holes already inserted into them. They were originally on a hanger to hang onto the tree. And we need to do the same method. Insert the wire so that it's roughly half of the way down the hole that's in the little star, and then we're going to wrap them round, and that will give us a nice secure placement to insert them into the arrangement. Okay, so let's bring that arrangement back in so you can see. And for me, I like the materials equally spaced out or grouped together. So I'm going to start by placing the cones in opposite one another. So you'll see 2 there on my side, and then going to insert the 2 on the opposite side, just like so. But if you want to spread them out more randomly and in less of a structured form, that's perfectly acceptable to do. And then I'm going to do the same with the sort of stars. I'm going to place 2 together on one side, and I'm going to bend them forwards so you can see the star more clearly. Gorgeous texture on the birch. This is probably silver birch, and that lovely silver colouring is going to pick up really nicely on the eryngium berries on the opposite side. And I'm going to place another one slightly lower down, so we've got those pretty stars on one side and the cones on the opposite side. So hopefully you've enjoyed that tutorial. Remember that the width of your arrangement is roughly half of the distance of your length, and it really is only an estimate for you to work on. It just tends to make the design more proportionally pleasing. And this is a design that is where the stems have all radiated out from the centre point. We may, if we've got time, look at this design created in a more parallel style, which is a little bit more European in its fashion. But I think that's a fantastic design for Christmas. So I think that's a really lovely Christmas design. You can alter the size of it to be in proportion with your table at home. So you can make it longer if you've got a bigger table, or shorter if your table is smaller. And it's easily achievable with some flowers from your local supermarket, or if you want to buy something more specialist from your local florist shop, then I'm sure they will help you choose suitable flowers. So I hope you've enjoyed that one. Look forward to seeing you again soon, and we're on the run up to Christmas, so hopefully there will be some more Christmas designs for you to see very soon. So bye for now.